Matre Namaha. My pranams to all the divine beings on and off the stage. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Anything said by our rishis, our sages, had so many layers of understanding. We often only speak about the philosophical version of it. But this is part of what we refer to as Sanatana Dharma. Dharma means to uphold, and Sanatana means that which is eternal, beyond time. Can philosophy be eternal on its own? Not unless this philosophy itself emerges from a deeper science. So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a biological experience of the rishis. An experience. So we don't just intellectually manipulate our mind to see each other as one, but we experience each other. And not just humans. We experience nature, we experience animals, we experience what we typically refer to as inanimate. How does that experience happen? If it's an experience, there must be something in the biology that makes it possible. If we understood that, perhaps we can get to the root cause of the problems we see today. So let's dig a little deeper to what might be the biological basis, the science behind this statement of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. In the modern medicine, we understand the physical body. In the Indian systems of Ayurveda and Tantra, we recognize that there is the Sthula Sharira, the physical body, but we also acknowledge the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. We talk of prana, the basic life force, and it wasn't just India that spoke of it. The Chinese called it chi, the Japanese called it ki. I believe in Islam and Sufism it is called ruh. Across ancient religions, across ancient civilizations, we recognized and experienced the subtle, the Sukshma Sharira. And medicine and understanding of the world came from that. So just as we have nerves and plexus points in the physical body, we have nadis and junctions where the nadis meet, called chakras, in the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. When the chakra at the heart, called the Anahata, when we bring prana there by focusing our mind and our attention there, that is when we experience inclusivity. We experience each other and all of creation in our being as one. And if we could manage that, the idea of hurting nature or another person would be unimaginable because we feel that very physically in our body. That is the state from which the rishis wrote Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. They were experiencing that deeply in their system. What would it take for us to get there today? I believe when India came up with this idea, it was the Great Mother herself guiding Bharat to gently shift our attention towards a different way of being. From a world where the primary objective is economic productivity, can we go to an objective where we experience everything as part of our own being? When we talk of a family, if it's the individual human family system, we recognize a mother and a father. If we broaden this and zoom it out, these are the qualities of the masculine and the feminine. The world as we see today is because there is a dominance of the masculine qualities. This is not necessarily of the male gender or the female gender, but rather energies. The world today is a dominance of the masculinity. So much so that even movements which seem to be for women, like the feminist movement, are basically the masculine in disguise. When we talk of equality, we are talking about suppressing women's cycles so that they become more acceptable like the masculine. India never understood the feminist, but we always lived, accepted, and experienced the feminine, Stritvam. This is the Devi Tattvam. Everything that I'm speaking or is being spoken through me is that Tattvam bringing forth this knowledge which you will experience. When that Stritvam, that femininity, reduces or dies, that is when we see a lack of respect for nature, because it is the feminine which experiences the nature. The masculine is more related or can relate more to the materialistic world as we know it. It operates largely from the Manipura chakra at the navel. So all forms of development, which is good, happens when that region is infused with prana. But if we could go one step higher to the heart, then there will be a beautiful balance of the feminine and the masculine. And that's where we need to get. Of the different goals of the G20, I noticed that two of the prominent things which connect today's conversation is one, the environmental damage and climate change as a big concern, and the other was women-led development. India proposed women-led development. I don't think India meant women behaving as men. The idea was to balance the masculine with the feminine, not the feminist, the feminine. What would that mean? You see, the feminine, women, those who embody the female form, naturally have the ability to experience nature and all of creation as themselves. And this happens because of the menstrual cycle. There is a temple in India, in Assam, called the Ma Kamakhya temple. Every year, at the time of the summer solstice, when we move from Uttarayana to Dakshinayana, it is understood that Ma Kamakhya menstruates. When I began to meditate on this idea, I realized that what this shift necessarily means is that in Mother Earth's system, there is a similar play of doshas as happens in a woman's body when she menstruates. So there is the rise of Agni Tattvam at that time. And when women menstruate too, in our bodies too, there is the rise of Agni Tattvam. And when Mother Earth menstruates, our cycles also come in sync. And you will be surprised that all the women who live in the vicinity of that temple menstruate together on the same day when this particular Ambubachi festival happens. This is a reality. Even today, as part of the work that my NGO did, when we would go into interior villages, we would see where there was lesser influence of development, all the women menstruated at the same time every month and marked their dates based on the cycles of the moon and the sun. So the feminine has it in its body to experience nature, provided it is not confused by social conditioning, telling it to behave like the masculine. I would like to straightaway come to 3 recommendations I would like to put forward to make this an implementable reality for the world. The first is mainstreaming of our native indigenous sciences. Even in India, Ayurveda is an alternative system, whereas what came from outside is mainstream. That does not even make logical sense. What is from here should be mainstream to here, and what comes from outside should be alternative. And this should happen across the world. Wherever natural ways of connecting with Mother Nature existed, nature was preserved. These were matriarchal societies. Across Europe, when women who could connect to Mother Nature were hunted and murdered as witches, there was a collective fear in the feminine. We still experience that fear of the feminine, of declaring herself as capable of this. And she doesn't have to do much. By virtue of this body, she connects to nature. But she's always trying to act like that doesn't matter. Women-led development means women suppress their cycles. So my first suggestion is that we mainstream those systems that recognize the Sukshma Sharira. And my second request is to make menstrual leave possible for all women across the world. Not because so many women have pain. According to Ayurveda, you're not supposed to experience pain. But because we're so out of tune with nature, our bodies are calling attention and saying, stop what you're doing. Please make this a reality for women across the world, a paid menstrual leave. This will bring back the balance, and many men do not realize that your route to connect to Mother Nature is via the women in your life and their cycles. If you just observe, when she is on her period, you will have mood swings. You will have decreased levels of prana to carry out your work because the woman in your life you're connected to is menstruating, bleeding with the earth. That's a great energy, a great force. You can't ignore it. And because the masculine struggles to connect to the feminine, their path is via the women. So when the woman becomes healthy, when her cycles are in sync with nature, automatically men become healthy. So this is my second request. And the third is this. We spoke about the anahata, the heart. Men, the male body, has to do a lot of sadhana to raise their prana to the heart. But for women, when they become a mother and when they breastfeed, milk is just the medium. They are feeding prana to the baby. And that love with the mother pours out is what defines the thought process of that infant in its initial years. Although the WHO has said that 6 months of breastfeeding is mandatory, many nations are not allowing a maternity leave that will permit 6 months of the mother to take time off. And we are thinking of work from home. But just picture this. Your prana carries your emotions. So you are thinking about work and you are in that mind and you're feeding your baby. Your baby is growing up with the thought of all the worldly things. This is a very, very subtle thing that happens. So my third request is to allow paid maternity leave for mothers up to 6 months, in keeping with the WHO guidelines itself. With that, I end my short talk. Thank you for your patience. Shri Matre Namaha.